take me a second to...
Yeah, I'd also like to throw in something that in that girl that Bogner was communicating with, the one that was trying to sell the empowering water and all that. She did a video where she said, well, what kind of world would you like to live in? One full of hope and whatever you want to make out, one that you imagine yourself essentially, or the real world? And I'm sorry, the real world's the only option I've got.
Can you mute Blog TV, please, Dan? Yeah, and also it might help if you mute your microphone when you're not talking. Are you able to hear us?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot, Igor.
Hi, Dan. What issue did you have to raise?
Well, I was reading an interesting article on New Scientist earlier this week on the 3rd of December, and it kind of related to what the original discussion was related to NASA and kind of having to alter the facts, so to speak, to gain public interest, which we shouldn't need to do, but we have to do regardless. And my question was more or less what the panel's opinion was how the Obama administration as a whole has been handling science in general. The article from New Scientist, this is a direct quote, John Holdren, director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, was given 120 days to draft a new policy on scientific integrity in government. We're still waiting for that policy to see the light of day. So it's almost as the Obama administration has given some false hope to science. This most recent kind of foray into the so-called extraterrestrial life being an example of that. I'm not sure if the panel views this administration as better or worse or the same as the previous on this issue.
Myself, I don't mind saying that I'm terribly disappointed when Obama did not when Obama did not fire anybody that Bush had hired, when he didn't reverse anything that Bush had set up in the first week, I was already thinking, okay, well, this is just another hand puppet president. Okay, so they got somebody who looks a little bit more exotic than what we're used to, and so that will cause all of us racist-minded Americans to think that we're headed for a change, and then we didn't get that. I'm very disappointed with everything I've seen, and more importantly, not seen, since this new president took power.
Concordance, are you able to give us any figures on how cuts have been made to the scientific budget in America?
I know that Obama is not a very popular president at the NASA JPL in Johnson Space Center in Houston. I'm personally apolitical. I refuse to jump behind any of them because they all seem like they're essentially versions of the same thing. But at the same time, I have to say, what's that?
Hand puppet president.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't seem to make that big a difference on a day-to-day basis for most of these things. But I will say that the last administration, for all the problems they had, was pretty favorable when it came to medical research. So the NIH budget was increased substantially, then it was decreased for a while, then it went back up for a while, but on the whole, I think there was an increasing trend. And of course, throwing money at a problem is never really the solution. But no one wants to change anything. There's too many sacred cows within this huge, giant umbrella NIH organization. NASA likewise, a lot of the cuts, the people at NASA tell me, were the kind of cuts that probably did need to get done, that the Constellation project was sort of faulty from the beginning, was too little too late kind of mentality. But obviously the salaries for.
Can I just ask for concordance? Who was responsible for ending the space shuttle program? Was that a result of Bush or Obama?
From what I understand, the president usually doesn't have a lot of impact. I mean, there's a budget meeting, and what the funding is voted on. It's all kind of mystery to me. But I understand that it was Obama's administration that eventually ended the Constellation program, although it was sort of dying to death before then. We're so deeply in the overruns on time and budget that everyone said this is what do they call it, the Concord fallacy. We keep throwing more money after something because we've already spent so much money on it.
Did you want to say something, or can I go back to Dan?
No, when we brought Obama in, of course, I was hopeful because, as other people on the audience have pointed out, what choice did we have? If we didn't have him, we would have had people that would have been sending witch hunters into our grade schools. It was an incredibly cheap collection of choices. We've either got one guy who appears sane, and we have a handful of people who aren't remotely sane. And that was the only choice we had, and it's a little disturbing that we're in this situation, and it's also a little frustrating me that I could see where progress could be made, and it's not being made. And I just am continuously disappointed in our current president.
Well, let me go back to Dan, and maybe just before we do, ask you to just turn down the volume of your microphone a little bit, because you actually came through a little bit distorted last time. Dan, did you want to come back on anything?
Yeah, I just was, wondering, and I've been listening to this, and it's intensely interesting to me. And if you go back through history, it's not until, I guess you could say, if we're just using NASA as a theme here, the 1960s where science has really mattered in government, obviously in the space race. And certainly it doesn't appear to me that it's mattering in government overall in terms of popular science. Obviously you have departments such as DARPA who are continuously, and think tanks that are continuously pumping out new exciting things, but not necessarily to the public. Whereas, if you, again, with the space thing, if you're looking at India and China, they're having their own sort of space race right now. So I'm thinking, what, if anything, we can do to increase public excitement about scientific discoveries, and truthful scientific discoveries at that.
I know, we should announce that we've discovered something very special about life in the universe.
Yes, you'd make a good PR person at NASA. Someone's head's on the block as a result of that, isn't it? It's got to be.
This administration, this is federal government, so... Did you know that most of the employees at NASA don't actually work for NASA? The majority of them work for a little company called Wiley Laboratories. So they're all treated as government contractors. For whatever administrative reason, it's all a mystery to me. But anytime equipment is sold or employees are hired, it's always to this little shell company.
Dan, any last comments or questions before I move on to the next caller?
No, thank you very much. You guys are great, and keep up the great discussions. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Just as I'm bringing them in, obviously people, I presume, are aware of the fact that since the last programme we've had another batch of DMCAs being issued, this time by Prestonwood Christian Academy, and Aaron Ra was subject to one of those. How did you feel when you got DMCA, Darren?
I was a little surprised that they would bother DMCAing me because I'm only doing a commentary. Yeah, I'm showing a lot of the video footage, but I'm talking over that. I don't have the audio except for a few key sentences, and I couldn't figure out what their beef was other than they wanted to shut me up. I made a prediction in one of those two videos wherein the students of this school, because they bust in all these Christian schools, and they all took field trips that day to watch the debate. Now, for what reason? Obviously, as they gave in the prologue, they explained that they were doing this not to consider the other side, not to have an open mind and evaluate the evidence the way they were advertising when they were on stage. But in the prologue, they said that they were doing this just so that they could automatically reject whatever was being said, and so that they were treating this as practice, like a football game. And they don't consider the possibility that one of them might actually change their mind. The entire core of their belief system is not allowing themselves to be influenced or convinced by the other side. That's what their entire basis is. So it was obvious that what they were going to do is they were going to hustle these kids back into their classrooms the next day, and somebody was going to have to denigrate everything Hitchens says while praising everything Dembski says, because they have to put a certain kind of a spin on it, right? And I had people writing to me that were in these schools, that actually were students attending these schools, and said, yes, that's exactly what they did.
Were you aware also that the Academy had actually produced a booklet prior to the event at a knockdown price of $35, in which it basically gave information about how to deal with these arguments from a smooth-talking Englishman, I think was the expression that was used. I presume they're meaning Hitchens.
Well, they certainly weren't talking about you.
No, they weren't talking about me. But Great Big Bore has just started doing Series 3 of God Needs a Quality Control, in which he's dealing with this booklet. He actually purchased one, so I haven't had a chance to watch any of those videos yet, but I'm looking forward to having a look at them. Anyway, let's bring...
yeah, I didn't know about that booklet until Great Big Bore started to do his video on it.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't see one when I was there. I didn't know anything about it beforehand. But I do think it's amusing that video...
Sorry, could you mute your microphone and mute Blog TV, Mark, and we'll come to you in a second. Thank you.
Right.
Sorry, Alan, do that.
I'll let it go. Lost my train of thought.
All right, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good. How can we help you?
Actually, let me first start by saying I'm actually big fans of all of you. I have subscribed to your channels and a lot, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question is more kind of a question comment about the public understanding of science.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
So let me start by saying I teach part-time at a college in Canada and part-time at a university in Mexico. And I've noticed that very few people have even a basic understanding of history, science, religion, other things. I grew up in a house where my mom had subscriptions to National Geographic, books, they taped biography, things like that. And things that I think are very important for the average person. So I watched a video made by Concordance.
Mark, can I if you don't mind, the quality of your excuse me, the quality of your call is very bad, and you're breaking up quite a lot. I don't mean to be rude, but can you cut to the chase, because we're really struggling to hear what you're saying.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. I just, the point of my call is that the public, especially in the US and Canada,
and now you seem to have gone altogether. Mark, what I'm going to do, Mark, is I'm going to... Okay,
He's calling from a cell phone inside of a UFO. That's what I get the impression.
yeah, I'm going to remove you, Mark, because not out of disrespect, it's just we literally couldn't hear what you were saying. I will call you back later and see if we have a better connection. But that does mean I've got to now try and find who I had lined up next. So, Aaron, fill in the gaps for me whilst I...
Well, he was talking about how people don't have an understanding of science, and he's talking about how he's teaching in Canada and he's also teaching in Mexico. Well, if he spent all his time in between those two countries, yeah, he's going to have a hard time finding his way to understand science. And why don't we?
He was going to go on about, he was going to go on about the video I made, Science versus Lore, where we talked about how people are basically rejecting what they were taught. And they do that in an active way, specifically because it makes them uncomfortable. Right? It's much more understandable, it's much more intuitive to believe in something like, an onion that turns black and I feel better at the same time. Those two things are somehow related, therefore the onion made me feel well. And this is a real thing. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people right now have a cut onion next to their bed because they think that it will pull the sickness out of them. And these are people that live in the country that has sent people to, the moon, that has satellites in orbit. And we have people that believe in these archaic beliefs. And they do it actively. It's not that they're stupid. It's that they've actively chosen something that makes more sense to them intuitively. Right? They're rejecting counterintuitive ideas.
Okay, here's the thing. You know how we often get these arguments about the Big Bang, for example, and how can you have nothing explode? You know, this huge explosion from nothing. The very people who argue how ridiculous that is have no problem at all accepting a black hole.